These are 5 celebrated vintage watch brands that looked nothing alike, sold at wildly different prices, and hid the very same engine inside. That engine was the Valjoux 72, a single hand-wound chronograph movement, and once you know its story, you'll never look at these watches the same way again. Let me start with the maker, Valjoux SA opened its doors in 1901 in Les Bioux, a village in the Vallée de Joux in Switzerland, founded by 2 brothers, John and Charles Raymond. The name itself is just a contraction of Vallée de Joux, and every genuine example carries a small cursive letter R for Raymond, tucked under the balance wheel. A rename to Valjoux SA arrived in 1929, and by 1944 the firm had been folded into the movement conglomerate Ébauche SA. The caliber at the heart of this story, the Valjoux 72, entered production in 1938 and ran until 1974. Picture a manual wind, column wheel chronograph with 3 registers, including the 12-hour counter at 6 o'clock that helped shape the classic chronograph dial we still recognize today. The vintage authority Justin Koullapis has called it arguably the finest manual wind chronograph ever. Here's how one movement found its way into so many different watches. The Swiss industry ran on what's known as the ébauche system, where a factory like Valjoux produced the unfinished base movement, and the watch brand then finished it, decorated it, regulated it, cased it, and very often gave it an in-house sounding caliber number of its own. Caliber Corner describes this as one of the original culprits of the smoke and mirrors side of the watch industry. The same movement appearing across different brands, later stamped with each one's private caliber number, creating the impression that the brand had built it. An estimated 750,000 of these movements from the Valjoux 72 family were made, and by Koullapis's count, they were shared among at least 17, possibly 19, manufacturers. Let's meet the 5. Rolex comes first. The Valjoux 72 sits inside every manual wind Cosmograph Daytona, from the very first in 1963 to the final references in the late 1980s. Rolex modified it, added its own microstella balance and Breguet overcoil hairspring, then renamed it Caliber 72B, then 722, then 727. No brand leaned on this movement harder, with an estimated 59,847 going into Daytona production alone. This is where the contrast becomes almost unbelievable, because Paul Newman's own Valjoux 72-powered Daytona sold at Phillips in October 2017 for $17,752,500, the world record for a wristwatch at auction. Heuer is next. The Carrera, reference 2447, launched in 1963, designed by Jack Heuer and powered by the very same Valjoux 72. And that identical movement also drove the first-generation Autavia, reference 2446. Koullapis remembers a time, as recently as the early 2000s, when 1960s Heuer Carreras changed hands between dealers for little more than £300. His verdict on how the two brands relate is blunt. Rolex made it famous, and the price followed naturally. Breitling comes third, and this one calls for precision. Only the earliest Navitimers, the so-called pre-806 models from roughly 1954 to 1955, carried the Valjoux 72. A switch came in 1956 with the commercial reference 806, which moved to the Venus 178, and the two movements differed enough that Breitling needed an entirely new case to house it, which is exactly what makes those earliest Valjoux 72 Navitimers among the rarest and most collectible of all. Universal Geneve is the telling case. Here was a respected manufacturer that built its own movements, and yet, for its top chronograph, the Compax collectors call the Rindt, the brand reached for the Valjoux 72 and badged it caliber 130, then 85, then 82. The watch takes its name, unofficially, from Nina Rindt, wife of the Formula One champion Jochen Rindt, who was photographed wearing it trackside. Enicar rounds out the 5. founded in 1913 by Ariste Racine and his wife Emma Blatt. With a name that's simply Racine spelled backwards, the brand built its Sherpa graph around the Valjoux 72. This is where the numbers land hardest. An Enicar Sherpa graph crossed the block at Antiquorum in Geneva in May 2022 for 5,875 Swiss francs. Same movement. A gap in price measured in the millions. That contrast is the whole point, though there's a twist worth understanding if you're buying today. Rather than looking down on a shared movement, collectors now prize the Valjoux 72 in its own right, and the non-Rolex watches that house it, the Heuers, the Universals, the Enicars, have climbed in value partly because buyers realized they share the Daytona's beating heart. One summary puts it plainly: the market has learned to value the movement, not just the name on the dial. So when a Daytona, a Carrera, an early Navitimer, a Rindt Compax, and a Sherpa graph sit side by side, you aren't looking at 5 unrelated watches at all. You're looking at 5 different faces of one movement, born in a small Swiss valley in 1938, the Valjoux 72. 5 different brands, one maker, and the more clearly you understand that, the more clearly you see what you're really buying.